nervous because I just fell over. But this one car like pulled up, and I swear this guy leaned out the window with the most worried expression. Like if you looked up a definition, like picture of someone worried, he looked like I was bleeding out, and it was so worried that I thought I was horribly mangled, and I didn't realize it because he stops his car, like screeches. He's in the other lane. He's like, Skrr! And he rolls down the window. He's like, "Are you all right?" And I'm like, "Am I? I don't know. Am I? Am I okay?"
I was hoping he would follow it up with, "Are you all right? You're riding a bike in a terrible storm. What's wrong with you?"
He was driving his car boat down the raging rapids. He dropped anchor right next to me, shouted down from the gangplank, "Oh, yeah, be ye all right?"
Driving his car boat up the road river.
I love the amphibious Honda Civic.
He dropped his brake anchor right next to me.
Branker.
Anyway, so I survived, and I pedaled home, and I sniffled a little bit, but I didn't cry.
Ah, somebody was a big boy. Sorry, I'm a dad now, so I talk like that.
I think you talked like that before, but I can't confirm it.
What? No, no. I was funny before. Now I'm dad.
It rained so hard here that I took the dogs outside, and when I'm waiting for them to pee and poop, I came back in, and I was somewhat wet.
Well, life is hard for everyone.
Yeah.
Good small talk, boys. I think we all come out on top of that. And for such an engaging and harrowing and life-threatening story, 2 points for Wade.
Thank you. It was really difficult.
Good try, Mark, but it was a little overproduced.
All right, that's fair enough. Will, damn you for adding in the production value to my story.
Well, anyway, those will be the last laugh. Wow, I almost just bit my tongue.
Ever?
The last laughs in today's episode. There should be some funny parts.
Point out the exits. Point out the exits just in
The
case.
exits are at the. Imagine I'm doing the weird hand-arm thing where they hold their arms too close together and then indicate with their fingers. The exits are over my shoulders, by the front, and then over the wings, and also just punch a hole in the window and jump out if you need to.
Do we need to remain seated?
Gosh, that's a terrible metaphor, guys. It's dead. The plane crashed. It's dead. We're now.
Oh, that's a much better metaphor. Okay, great.
No one survived except for us. Now let's do this podcast.
It's too late to escape.
There's no accents on this. You're just here now. Today, I've asked special permission. Instead of hosting some sort of competition where I keep a kind of score and arbitrarily pick a winner at the end, I'm going to tell a story. And this is not going to be like the fridge story where I was so unbelievably angry that everything was funny, even if it was something that wasn't that funny. This is the story of how my son James was born, and about all the special things that happen or can happen when a woman is pregnant and about to give birth, and actually doing the giving birth part that nobody tells you about. I was prepared by television and pop culture to do a lot of waiting at the hospital, to just sort of stand around and you know, hold Mandy's hand, and for it to be a whole thing where she basically did it and I just sort of watched and brought her ice chips and held her hand and was like, "You can do it. Remember, you're breathing." And spoiler alert, that's not really how it went.
What?
I don't know how common our experience, Mandy's experience is compared to the rest of the world, but it's a little bit of a twisty story, I will say.
I'm assuming it's this is obviously the sequel to Bob's Fridge, as we all know. So everyone get your popcorn, prepare for hilarity, and lots of bumbling delivery men.
What's this one called? Bob's Life? Bob's Wife?
Bob's Baby.
BB?
Bob Baby? I know. I think you need more letters than that. I don't know. It's the story of James. His name is James, by the way.
All right.
For anyone who didn't know that.
Good name.
Yeah. Strong name. Family name.
Family name.
I do want to start this. A lot of people may know this. I want to start this by saying that Mandy was really sick for her entire pregnancy, which was not a thing that either of us knew could happen. I think I talked to you guys about this a lot, but you know how morning sickness is like a thing, right? That they show in movie and TVs. Mandy essentially had morning sickness starting around the second month of being pregnant, except she had it all day, every day, and for the entire pregnancy.
That sounds terrible.
She was effectively like bedridden. And some days it would not be so bad. There was a medicine that they gave her that helped with the nausea, but sometimes it didn't do anything. And like she literally could not stand up even sit upright. Food was not an option. There was a stretch where she basically subsisted on water if she could drink it, and then like Powerade, because that was the only thing that she could keep down. So bad start.
Yeah.
Not how I thought pregnancy was going to be.
Yeah, thanks, James.
Yeah, well, it was his fault. He's a real jerk.
I hope you're listening to this years in the future, James.
I'm sure he will. This will last the test of time.
Can I ask a quick question before we continue, though?
Uh-huh.
The name James, is it from whenever we played that game with Sean and we were reading the notes and we always ended with James?
I don't think. What are you even talking about?
It's that one where you're all getting books to put in the circles, and then you burn the books in the circles, and there were a bunch
Western.
of notes.
It was like the Western thing with the guy with the gun, and we read the notes. It's like, sincerely, James.
I would name my child after that for certainly. What a powerful memory for you, both you and Mandy.
It was a close call between that and also it's my dad's middle name, and it's kind of a family name.
Ah, 2 birds, 1 stone.
Yeah.
Interesting. So your dad's from the West.
Yeah, that's implied by what I said.
Great.
You could even say it's strongly implied.
He's from the West.
Yeah, the West.
The West, sure.
All right, fair enough.
All right. Look, so the pregnancy was rough, and there were some other twists and turns, but finally Mandy got to the end, and it started kind of weird. I sort of thought, when you get to the end of a pregnancy, you start to have the baby, your water breaks, whatever. Dramatic drive to the hospital, boom. It got to the end, and because of Mandy's situation, they didn't want to let her just wait. They wanted to get the baby out, but they didn't schedule a day. They were like, well, starting on this date, you're going to get a call from the hospital at some point. It could be up to a week or 2 weeks after that date. Any day, anytime, just expect a call where they're going to be like, okay, come to the hospital. It's time to have a baby.
Wait, I thought you had to wait for the water to break, then you went in. They scheduled the water breaking?
They scheduled-ish a time for her to come in and be induced.
Okay.
They have medicine and stuff they can do to make you make a woman start having the baby.
And if the water broke before that, you would just go in earlier? They were like, oh, sorry, your appointment's not for another 2 weeks.
Show up and they're like, no, you know the time.
Can you just hold it for a while? Thanks.
Yeah, can you just hold that back in there?
Here's a bottle of Dasani. Just put some of that in there, top it up, and come back in a week.
Your shower have one of those standard plugs that keeps the water from draining. Just put that in there. Keep the baby in. We'll see you in a couple weeks.
Mm-hmm.
Probably. Oh, well, luckily we didn't have to experience that, but I don't know. It was weird. It was scheduled, but there wasn't a date. Anyway, we're waiting for them to call us and tell us to come to the hospital. And as we're literally on the way to a doctor's appointment, because at the end of the pregnancy, they wanted to see Mandy like every week to just check the baby and check her vitals and stuff. We're sitting in the parking lot outside of the doctor about to go in, and we get the call from the hospital that's like, all right, we have a room ready for you. Come in. And this hospital is not close to our house. This hospital is 35-ish minutes away. Because somehow, even though California is one of the most populated places, and we live in the East Bay, well, east of the Bay, and it's an extremely populated area. There is no hospital within half an hour of our house.
That seems scary.
How is that possible? So anyway, we have to go home from the doctor, get our bags and stuff, put them in the car, and go to the hospital. And we do that. It's exciting. It's time to go and to have the baby. It's very exciting. And by the time we get to the hospital, it's almost an hour later because we have to do all that stuff. We walk up, and after we've done the extensive security process, which is just awesome, finally we get inside, and the nurse is like, oh, well, you have to wait outside for a while. And where have you been? We've been waiting for you. We almost gave your room away. What are you doing? And we were like, you called us less than an hour ago. We were doing stuff.
What security process is there to get into a hospital?
Dude, getting into a hospital is like visiting someone in prison.
Whoa.
Really?
There is nowhere in the hospital that you can go where you're not buzzed through a door with a badge with your picture on it that says why you're there and all this stuff. It has a date on it and they expire. It's not armed guards everywhere. It's just, it's like security people, but it's like that. It's crazy.
I imagine it's even worse for a maternity ward just because of the nature of what's going on in there and the kind of people that are crazy.
Babies are very dangerous. They must protect everyone from the babies escaping.
Not because of the babies.
Armed guards at every door to keep those babies from getting out.
You know the true nature of babies. We can't unleash that on the world.
It's like Batman Begins. Doctor is looking at a baby like, we gotta get you out of here. It's dangerous. And he's like, they're trapped in here with me.
Okay. So high security. I didn't know high security hospitals were a thing. I learned something today.
I didn't either. And it was like, it wasn't awful, but it was a lot, right? Because there are COVID limits on visitors and stuff also. So like both of our parents were in town to see the baby. So they wanted to meet him as soon as possible. Only 2 people could visit at a time, which means that I couldn't be in there with both of either of our parents. So I had to like tag people out at the security door and be like, I'm leaving this room and they're going into this room. So there's not too many people in it. And the security person would like call and then call someone else. And then after a while be like, all right, you two can go in. You don't go in there. You get out of here. It's like a whole thing. It was a weirdly unpleasant part of it that wasn't a big deal, but was kind of annoying. But anyway, we finally get to the hospital. And we're like, this is cool. They show us they put Mandy in a room, and eventually they bring me back and show us the room. There's like a big bed for Mandy and a little bed for the baby and a dad couch for the me. And it's cool. You know, like, this is not so bad. I was expecting that I would have to just, like, sleep on the floor or I don't know. It's a nice room. And theoretically, if everything goes correctly, Mandy would go through labor, give birth in that room, then they'd put the baby over in the little baby bed, and that would be great. And at some point, once he's born and everything's cool, they would move us over to the, like, recovery room, where you just hang out with your baby for a day or two after you give birth to make sure everyone's healthy, and then you go home. So we were like, this room is sweet. It's big, it's spacious. We have our own thermostat. It's not bad. The couch even turned into a bed. So we were optimistic. Unfortunately, this room is also the beginning of the chapter I've decided to call the bad part.
Oh boy.
So we're settling into this.
Is that the name on the plaque above the door? It's just like in red lettering with dripping red blood, the bad part.
In my mind palace, this part of the story lives in an elevator where when the doors open, blood rushes in.
Oh, God.
If you're eating food, this is your time to put down that sandwich.
That's a Shining. Calm down. It's a Shining reference.
They're all driving. They're not eating sandwiches at the same time. That would be far too dangerous.
They're all driving. No.
Yeah, they're all driving just to see what happens.
Did you see the post? Sorry, this sidetrack. There was someone that actually posted a picture of their car, and it was just like, yeah, I actually got in an accident listening to this podcast because it's so hilarious. The risks.
Please don't do that.
Such a great podcast. Only good things happen.
Wait, I don't think it was a choice.
Don't do
that.
The
podcast forced its way onto their radio while they were driving.
They heard a joke and they were like, I'm going to choose to crash.
I don't think that was the part.
They didn't tell me where the emergency exit was. Ha, ha, ha.
Take that, bridge.
Do not drive. Do not operate machinery sharp. In fact, don't operate anything of any kind.
Yeah,
don't eat. Don't drink. Don't even listen while you're listening.
Our podcast is equivalent to powerful muscle relaxants, so just like beware.
Well, until you know how it affects you, at least. Yeah, so we're settling into this room, and it's super great, and we're really excited for it, and that is the bad part. So Mandy's body tends to react pretty strongly to medications, just meaning like, you know, if there's a painkiller, it will hit her really hard. It will make her extra sleepy or whatever, she'll feel it. But also her body tends to like getting all the little side effects that you know, drugs frequently have listed with them, but not a lot of people might get. So we know this about Mandy. It's just sort of how her physiology works or whatever. And so to start inducing her to have the baby, because she's not naturally starting to have contractions and stuff yet, they give her this medicine that is supposed to start the process of having the baby. It just tells your body to like start doing all the stuff it's supposed to do to get the baby out of there. And she starts having contractions, which is great. And they're setting her all up. And the contractions start to be like a lot. Not painful, actually. She wasn't in too much pain, but they were like almost constant. Kept happening, and they're not really supposed to do that. They're supposed to, like, you know, be some minutes in between, maybe 5-10 minutes, maybe longer. Sometimes they might be, you know, a couple minutes apart, but at this point they're not, as far as I know, they're not really supposed to be that close together. She was having back-to-back contractions, and it wasn't too bad because, like I said, it wasn't too painful. You could just kind of tell it's contracting. But what can happen when you have contractions too frequently is it can lead to the baby inside of the mom having decels, which is short for heart rate decelerations. which is not good.
Sounds bad.
Baby's heart rate's supposed to be like between like 130 to 160, which is super fast, but it's supposed to be really fast, right? And most of the time when he was checked out previously, his heart rate was like in the 150s-ish. But so Mandy started to have these contractions, and they just kept happening, and eventually the baby was on a heart monitor. Eventually he had a D-cell, and the nurse kind of looked and was like, that's a problem. But she kind of like moved Mandy around. Maybe he had, gotten a bad position. Who knows? And she kind of worked on it for a minute, and eventually the D-cell went away on its own. It was a little like stressful, but went away. Baby went back to normal. Totally fine. It wasn't like painful on Mandy when this was happening, but it like triggered like an adrenaline response almost. It gave her like really like panicky feeling, and it obviously does not help when you're stressed out and you're worried that your baby is having trouble. But it was okay. Eventually it went away on its own, and we were like, whew, all right, that's enough of that. Let's just hang out. It's going to be, 12 to 24 hours, maybe longer, before Mandy's ready to give birth. This is about to be the longest part, the part that's really painful because it goes on, and Mandy keeps having more painful contractions. That's what's supposed to happen. We were mentally preparing for a long time of being in this room and helping Mandy get through, a long labor and then to delivery. And we did that for about 20 minutes until the next D-cell happened. And this time his heart rate went like really slow. His normal range is like 130 to 160, like I said. His heart rate was down in like the 30s.
Just not the 130s, the 30s?
The 30s. Like
30s.
the double digits.
And what was the normal?
130 to 160 is the normal range for the fetal heart rate.
Right.
Yeah, 30 is pretty low. That seems pretty bad.
So that's not great. And so the nurse, again, calmly was like, problem, and started moving Mandy around. But this time it didn't get better. And at some point the nurse was like, it's not getting better. And like literally called in the cavalry. Where it was me, Mandy, and one nurse in the room up to this point. And the nurse came and went and was doing other stuff, but she came, was helping Mandy, taking care of her. And at this point, she called the cavalry, and like 5 or 6 more nurses rushed in, and 3 doctors rushed into the room. And they like circled around Mandy and politely, but firmly were like, please back up. To me, they were like, get in your corner, stay back, get out of the way. And this was like way more stressful than the first time. This is not a casual thing where it's like, oh, that's not good, let's fix that. This is like a horde of medical professionals rushed into the room. They're doing stuff. One of them's doing something with Mandy's IV. A couple of them are trying to move Mandy around. One of them's like doing some scans or whatever with a medical device of some sort. It's a lot of action. And the nurses are the ones actually doing everything. The doctors are standing back kind of by me, kind of looking at each other and talking and being like, do you think we don't need to do that yet. Okay, let's give her a couple minutes, see what happens. Like low talking in a way where I'm standing there not really hearing what they're saying, but kind of watching and being like, what the fuck are you doing? What's happening?
Yeah.
Is this okay? And so that was awful. There were some moments where Mandy and I met eyes and we're kind of both like, what is happening? Holy shit. Until the rest of what happened. That was probably one of the scarier moments of my life right there, because we're like, is Mandy okay? Is the baby okay? No one's really saying a lot because they're all really busy doing their job, which I have to say, all the nurses and doctors did an excellent job. They are like fantastic. They were amazing. I have my issues with Kaiser, and we've talked about healthcare in general before and stuff like that. The actual people in the hospital were amazing. They did fantastic work. So, like, cheers to them. But Mandy and I are standing here not really sure if someone is in life and death peril or if it's going to be fine or what. That happened for like 10, it felt like an hour, but I think it happened for like 10 or 15 minutes. Eventually, they got the heart rate back up for the baby, and everyone kind of took a breath, and the doctors were like, okay, and just left the room, and the nurses slowly made their way out. And at this point, the basic theory was, we don't know why that's happening. It's probably fine. It shouldn't happen again. He seems fine.
That's a good theory.
Oh, good, yeah.
So, that's comforting. And everything went back to normal for maybe half an hour. It felt like a second because, again, out of nowhere, it felt like 5 seconds later, another D-cell started happening. And it was immediately like, call the cavalry. This is a bad sign. What the hell keeps happening? Everyone rushes back in. They start doing more stuff. And this time the doctors are way more concerned. They're looking and they're like, we don't really know why this is happening. We're very confused about this. And at this time, at some point, the baby moved and they weren't able to get a heart rate reading of him the way they check his heart rate is they basically strap a thing on the outside of mom's belly, and that like gives the baby's heart rate by just sensing it through her belly and stuff. They couldn't find him, so the baby heart rate monitor was just like flatlined at 0, and a couple nurses were frantically moving the sensor around, and everyone was kind of just standing watching as the nurses were like, we can't get it, we can't find him, I'm not sure about this. So we don't even know what's happening right now. We don't know if the baby's okay or what. And I was like, okay, this is the worst part. This is just awful, so much worse than before. And finally they're like, we're gonna try this thing, we're gonna take this huge needle and stick it up into where the baby is and basically pop the bag that he's in, because the baby up inside of mom's uterus is in a sack filled with fluid, right? When your water breaks, what's happening is the sack that the baby is in with all the fluid that he floats in, that breaks, the fluid rushes out, and that is, leading towards giving birth. Mandy is nowhere near giving birth at this point. She is, I think 2 centimeters dilated at this point, maybe, and you're supposed to get up to like 10 to give birth. And they're like, we're going to take this huge needle and stick it up in there and pop the baby balloon, and then we're going to take this other huge stick and this circle thingy and stick it up in there and put a thing right on the baby's head without being able to see anything, by the way. They just did it by feel, because you can't see up inside the mom. That's not how the anatomy works. And they were like, there's almost no risk to this. There are some risks, but it's probably fine. We do this, we do this regularly. It's okay. So they do that because we can't get the baby's heart rate, and we're like, God, I hope he's alive still. Do the thing. And they do that, and they get his heart rate back, and it's still decelerating, or decelerated, I guess. And they do some more stuff, and finally, after just screwing around and getting to the point where the doctor started to talk to me about emergency C-sections, and they were sort of like coming over to me, and they're like, we might have to do this. It's going to be fine, but if we make the decision, we're basically going to sprint out of here and rush your wife straight to an operating room. It's an emergency procedure, so we have no time to like explain it. So just so you know, if we decide to do that, the room will be empty in like 30 seconds, and we'll be taking good care of your wife. Don't worry. And I'm like, yeah, good. That sounds like a thing I wouldn't worry about. Why would I be worried about that? That sounds great.
Yeah, easy stuff.
Yeah. So obviously in my head, I was like, okay, well, this is the worst part. And I hope they don't do the emergency C-section, because that's an incredibly dangerous thing as far as complications and mortality around giving birth. Emergency C-sections cause and or lead to all of the highest mortality rate complications that can happen when you're giving birth. A lot of the most dangerous stuff is excessive bleeding, infections. I don't remember all the things, but like emergency C-section is the main thing Mandy and I had talked about we wanted to avoid. We wanted to do everything to keep that from happening, because that presented the most danger to both her and the baby. So we're back in the room, and the doctor's like, okay, well, we have to decide in the next couple minutes if she doesn't get better. And right as they were about to make the call and sprint her out of the room, the baby chilled out, and his heart rate went back up, and Mandy sort of calmed down. She had been in incredible stress and like panic and some pain from all this, but he chilled out, and the doctors were like, all right, that seems good. We don't know what we did. I don't think we fixed anything, but he's fine now.
Oh, yeah.
Did they leave in the exact same manner? They were like, all right, this was a lot scarier, but we're done, Sigmund.
They did. They straight up did. The doctors looked and were like, I guess we can go, and skittered away, and the nurses all sort of filtered out.
Mm-hmm.
And our nurse, who was like the one who was supposed to be taking care of our room on the floor or whatever, was like, okay, well, if she could just chill out for a while and the baby can stop doing that, it's almost time for the epidural.
Mm-hmm.
Which is the thing where they numb like the bottom half of the woman's body.
Mm-hmm.
So it makes it, instead of incredibly painful, it makes it more like incredibly uncomfortable when the contractions are happening and when she's trying to push the baby out and stuff. It really doesn't completely take away the sensation of pain and discomfort, but it makes it bearable, more bearable. Anyway, is the point.
I've had an epidural before, so I can attest to this.
How was it?
It was fine. It's actually worked out really well. It's things that people probably don't understand too well. They actually tap into your spine, and so they pick a spinal column piece, and they stick a needle in there, and then they inject a local anesthetic and a painkiller into that specific nerve, and it basically makes everything below that not really feely very much.
Yeah.
But with my case, they put too much, paralytic or and my legs weren't working properly, which isn't supposed to happen.
Yeah, no, that's weird.
Yeah, but it's actually not in the bloodstream. So I'm not a medical professional, but I believe in the case of childbirth, it's less likely or extremely unlikely or doesn't get into the baby's bloodstream at all, I think.
Something like that.
I'm fairly sure.
Wouldn't you damage a nerve by stabbing it with something?
I guess
I don't know how it works.
Stab the nerve itself.
What do you stab?
You stab into the area where the nerve is.
I have some thoughts about that process, though. How was it having them put the thing into your back, Mark?
Thankfully, I
watched him do it to Mandy. Okay,
I was asleep.
that's good. It's not a great process because I understood before this what an epidural was. And so it's basically like it's more complicated and delicate, but it's basically similar to putting an IV in, right? You stab with a needle, and then over that needle, you feed a little like plastic tube, and then that plastic tube delivers the medicine directly into the little hole that you made.
How do they get it into her back if she's pregnant and laying on her back?
They made her sit up and then arch her back forward so that her back was like a big stretched out arch, and then they're just like, sit real still, stabbing your nerves. But also, the process of finding the right spot was way less precise than I would have thought. I watched, they didn't let me watch from the side where they were doing the stabbing. I was in front of Mandy, so I couldn't see. But the anesthesiologist comes in, and they call an anesthesiologist because it's a difficult and important procedure to do correctly. And they get it all set up, and they sterilize her back, and then they put a dressing over it and stuff, all this stuff to make a sterile field in the area. And then the anesthesiologist just took a needle and started poking Mandy's back and was like, poke? And does that hurt? And Mandy is like, yeah. And the anesthesiologist was like, okay, wrong spot. Poke somewhere else. Does that hurt? Mandy is like, well, less, but yeah. Okay, it's like you're poking my back. They did that for like 10 minutes. They were just like, poke. Oh, that hurts. Poke. Oh, that hurts more. Sorry. Poke until they find one where it doesn't hurt and Mandy doesn't feel it in her legs or anything. They kept asking her questions. And then when they find the right spot, they're like, all right, that's the spot. And they mark it, and then they do the epidural. Mandy's bruise on her back from getting the epidural, like several days after when we were trying to leave the hospital, it's like 6 inches around. It was a big bruise.
Yeah, eesh.
And that's not how I would have thought you would do that in such a delicate area as the spine, where you're just like, poke. Does that hurt? Ah, darn it.
That does seem relatively barbaric.
I don't think that's standard procedure. I'm going to go off on a limb and say, like, they know what spine piece they're looking for, and there's, like, a place to... What would they gain from knowing what hurt?
Well, so what it seemed like she was doing is she was trying to find, like, the center of something. She started off and was like poking around on the left side and then found kind of the edge of that and then went over to the other side and was kind of doing the same thing. And eventually what she was aiming for was a specific, some piece of anatomy or whatever in the middle of that area where Mandy didn't feel the pain. Presumably is where she wasn't hitting any nerves that were running down Mandy's spine. And it was like, I don't know, it was like an artery or something where the medicine was supposed to go. But it just was a really concerning thing to watch. It didn't bring a lot of confidence. And also, like, after the anesthesiologist finished doing this and put the tube in and got it all set up, she then gives, like, a test dose of the drugs and is like, let's see if it works. Let me know if your legs start to get numb, and it takes like 10 or 15 minutes. So you're sitting there like, are your legs numb? No? Okay, just keep waiting. God, I hope it's in the right hole or whatever. But I get why they don't. I mean, aside from it being sterile and I couldn't go where the sterile field was, I get why they don't want the dads to watch. It didn't seem like a great process. I feel like they could refine that one a little bit.
Yeah, that doesn't seem like how I would have expected it. I thought they would just like have some super bed that's got like a hole underneath, pre-planned for applying the epidural. And it's like, okay, just lay down, stay comfortable. We're just gonna unscrew this little spot. We're gonna stab in the epidural, and you're good to go. Not lean forward, pretend you're trying to touch your toes while also there's a baby in the way. Now we're gonna hammer your back for 10 minutes. Oh, this might be it. Here, let's get another 15 minutes while I just wait and see. If we're not numbing your legs, something will be numb. I hope it's not something important.
Look, man, people think that medicine is a lot more elegant than it is. It's really pretty barbaric, some of the things you have to do, because doctors don't have green Healy goop in the back, They kind of just like stop the red life goop from getting out of your body and hope your body knows what it needs to do to make that not happen anymore. That's kind of like the entirety of medicine.
Well, in the hope that the chemicals they slurry in there all mix together real good and don't do any crazy stuff.
Yeah.
I like to think there's a cauldron in the back, and they just add ingredients, stir it up, and they put it in a needle. Like, yeah, this is what they need. Hopefully, we didn't have Eye of Newt, but hopefully, Eye of Salamander works instead.
Dude, that's literally it. Except they have more technical names for it.
The injection of Theseus.
Ius Salamanderus.
You know, they thought you would have figured it out a few hundred years ago, but when they discovered blood types, you know, before that, it was real weird. Yeah, sometimes people just got bad blood. You put blood in and it gets not blood. That's weird.
Is that what that Taylor Swift song is about? I didn't realize that was about medicine.
Yes, it's actually a historical song, going back in time.
I thought that song was about robbing banks.
You do a blood injection and the person gets worse and you're like, now we got bad blood. Damn it. Only there was a way to check that. So this is not related to our birth story at all, but I learned in researching all of this and preparing for what was going to happen, apparently not preparing well enough, but trying to, tribes on the continent of Africa have apparently been giving totally successful C-sections since like the 19th century. I don't know the details because I'm not a medicine person, and also I didn't continue to try and research down that hole because I didn't think that applied to Mandy's pregnancy, hopefully. But apparently the white guy who discovered C-sections, Mr. Caesarean or whatever his name is, went to Africa and saw them do it and was like, holy shit, you just cut that lady open and took the baby out and she's fine. We don't even know how to do that with our fancy Western medicine. I don't know the details, but I thought it was fascinating. Literally hundreds of years ago, midwives in tribes in Africa were capable of doing a C-section, surgically removing a baby, and both the mother and the baby would survive and recover and be just fine, which is wild.
I wonder if they applied the epidural the same way.
They really nailed it down with one prick epidural.
They probably had beds with holes in them.
They figured it out. It's the bed hole. You're right.
They had the super beds long ago. They mastered that, actually. We've lost the art.
But anyway, I just thought that was an interesting medical fact because that means that they were doing surgery, which basically predated a lot of successful, sort of Western medicine surgical techniques and stuff. Very interesting.
Yeah, that's a long time ago to be doing that kind of operation and it turning out okay, at least in my head, considering how barbaric medicine is now with apparently all the knowledge and technology we have.
Yep. Well, that's your historical medical fun fact of the day, but unfortunately we have to go back to the epidural.
Which definitely worked, right, the first time?
You know what?
Didn't you hear?
It ended up being totally fine. All of the process of the epidural made me super uncomfortable, but it ended up working perfectly. Her legs got numb, and then they started giving her the full dose of the drugs, and so the epidural was in, and that was going to stay in until the baby was born. And so we come to the end of the chapter that is called The Bad Part.
Oh, good. Okay, so the bad part's over with.
So logically speaking, this must be the good part.
Obviously.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I'm glad the bad part's over with.
That's why the next chapter is titled, of course, The Badder Part.
No, come on.
No one saw that coming.
Oh.
No one would have seen that coming.
I was hopeful that it wasn't.
Yeah, well, of course. It's not over. It never ends. That's the last thing I have written on my my notes for this, by the way, is just kidding. It never ends. Now there's a baby in my house. Turns out you bring that home with you, and then there's a whole other set of things that happens.
The epidural worked, then we just cut to baby in house, now it's worse.
Yep, that's the whole story.
Wow.
No, yeah, so the badder part, the next part. So, like, the epidural worked. Her legs went numb, and they started giving her the regular dose of the medicine, and so she was going to be in, almost no pain at that point, because the contractions were not getting very painful yet. And they checked her, and Mandy was 4 centimeters dilated. 4 out of 10. For those of you who don't know what the correct answer is, she was almost halfway. And that's great.
4 out of 10's better than The Last Jedi got.
Yeah, better than a lot of movies get. Not even in Rotten Tomatoes.
It's always movies with you, Wade. How many more are you stealing?
Well, I gotta be ready for the next episode, I hope.
Yeah, so for about 10 minutes, the epidural is working, everything is fine, and then 10 minutes goes by, and Mandy starts to feel kind of funky. Remember I said that drugs tend to have a very strong effect on her. she starts to feel kind of weird. And suddenly, you'll never guess what started to happen. The baby started having another extended bout of deceleration.
Come on, James.
Deceleration 2.
Deceleration 3.
3.
The decelerating.
Deceleration 3. The slowening.
It's just so slow. It's the slowest it had ever been. This decel was so bad that it dipped under 20 beats per minute at some point. It didn't go into single digits, but it dipped even lower than previously. And this time, it got worse kind of quickly. Everyone rushes back in. All the nurses are back. The anesthesiologist is back, and she's all, oh, shit, what did I do? Because it started where, after the epidural started happening. And Mandy keeps feeling, like, worse and worse. The baby's heart rate keeps edging lower, and Mandy keeps feeling worse. At one point, Mandy was in so much, I don't know if it was pain, but it was, like, distress and discomfort and everything. The doctors were asking her questions, trying to gauge, what she's feeling, what's happening. She couldn't even respond. She heard them talking to her, but she could not focus and get her mind together enough to give them a response to the question. And so the doctor asked, it was like, where does it hurt? How much out of 10? How much is your pain? And she would look at them, and then she couldn't speak. And they were kind of like, so a lot of pain probably. Interesting.
Is that normal?
No, I don't think it is. The epidural is supposed to not do that. But anyway, what they think happened after everything cleared up and I sort of talked to them for a second is that the epidural did what it was supposed to, but also somehow it accelerated her contractions. Remember, she was having almost constant contractions because of the medicine they gave her initially. Well, at this point, the contractions were just actually constant. She was just contracting 100% of the time. It wasn't stopping. They gave her a drug that's supposed to stop contractions from happening specifically. No effect whatsoever. And this was going on a long time. And they kept watching, and it got to that point where the doctors were kind of talking to me and trying to explain to Mandy, we might have to do an emergency C-section. If we do that, we're going to rush you out of the room, all that same stuff. And at this time, it just kept getting worse, and everyone kept getting more stressed, and they were like, can we give her this? No, we already gave her that. Can we try this? I tried that before, it didn't work. To this point, all the medical people had been super calm. They were working very with purpose, but they were all calm, and they were like, all right, we're going to do this. We're going to try this. But it got to the point where even the nurses and the doctors were kind of like, do this right now. See if she responds to this. No response. Okay, we need to try, it was escalating. And I could tell from the mood that it was escalating. And the doctor, at one point, the doctor just looked over at me and was like, we have to do it. And then looked at the group and was like, emergency C-section, let's go. It was like a tornado of activity. They gathered the IV, all this stuff, they unplugged the things, they moved the bed, whoosh, out of there. And I am left standing in a room by myself. Well, they just rushed my wife and baby out of the room to an operating room to start an emergency surgery. And I just stood there for a second, kind of shocked, right?
Yeah, I'm shocked. That was so fast.
Yeah, from the doctor saying the words to me alone, completely in a silent room, maybe 20 seconds. Everything just pull the plug, get the thing, roll the bed, get out of here. We're gone. We're moving. It's crazy.
I can't believe Mandy and the baby put you through this.
It turns out someone's at fault. And we'll get to that.
Oh, I can't wait till that chapter.
Oh, interesting.
It's not me, right?
It's not you.
I would be amazed if somehow it was you.
Do you have a friend named Wade? Because this is all his fault. I do, actually. I knew it.
Points for Wade for predicting the future.
Yes,
is it his fault? It's his fault.
But you lose those points for it being your own fault.
Do I need to get legal counsel for this?
Yeah, actually, you should have received service at this point. If someone knocks at your door asking for Mr. Barnes, definitely answer it and confirm who they're looking for before you do anything else.
Okay, I'm gonna trust you on that.
But yeah, so I'm left alone in the room, and at that point, I wasn't really sure what was gonna happen. Because normally the father can be there if they want to be for the birth of a baby, right? If it's a natural birth, I'm holding Mandy's hand, very stereotypical. Even if it's a C-section, I'm allowed to be in there. They put up a drape or whatever, and I'm allowed to sit by Mandy, the top half of Mandy, and hold her hand while they do the thing. Because they don't make you go unconscious. Mandy is totally conscious during the C-section in this story, which must feel pretty freaking weird. But yeah, I didn't really know what was going on. And then at some point after they were all gone, a nurse just came and brought me some scrubs and was like, put these on, and then we're going to put you in a place to wait, and if there's time, they'll bring you into the operating room, maybe.
Oh.
And so I did that, and she walked me over to this room, which was the recovery room, where they were going to bring everyone after a successful surgery, hopefully. And I was put in there alone. And I swear to God, it felt like an hour. Normally, that sounds like a stressful situation, probably, and maybe a very upsetting situation. Telling the story, that's like how I feel. I still feel pretty upset about this. At the time, it escalated from me being worried, upset, anything like that, to like rage. Like I was gonna fight God if he came and tried to take Mandy or the baby away or whatever. I don't know. I was in that room clenching my fists, thinking and saying stuff that is burned indelibly into my memory and that I would never in a million years have thought that I would say or do or even think.
I want so badly for someone to have come in here and be like, see, I told you it'd be okay. The doctor examined Mandy's cervix, and I was like, I don't think it's big enough for a baby to get through there. And the doctor was like, oh, yes, it is. I'm sorry.
And I forgot there was a pipe under there, and just wow.
So they pulled the baby through, and all I hear is slunk, whoosh. The water's going everywhere.
There's got to be some kind of shutoff somewhere. You'll find it.
Yeah.
See, I told you.
Can you hold this for a while? I gotta go get some. Just pinch it shut.
Oh, you want stitches or put a Band-Aid on this? No, you just hold it. Just kink it over. It'll stop.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to detract from Clenched Fist Bob. Just it reminded me of when that dude said that to you.
I appreciate that, actually, because I wasn't sure if I'd be able to tell this part of the story and keep it together. But, like, this was the actual worst part. I was in a room, an empty room, and the lights were off. It was like, it was like emergency lighting only or whatever. By myself, it was probably more like 15 or 20 minutes. It felt like forever. I wasn't sure what was happening. If it was bad that it was taking a long time because something bad had happened, or if it was good and they were just busy. I had no idea. No one came and updated me. At some point, some poor nurse or somebody came through and was just like doing their job, looking. They came in and were like, I need this thing. And they saw me, and I must have shot them just the craziest fucking glare that I can't imagine because of what I was thinking and saying in my head. But that is, and hopefully will remain, the worst 10, 20 minutes of my entire life. I don't know how to express what I was making promises to God and any God that would listen. I was making, bold claims about what I would change my whole life. I was doing all the most cliched things, right? Where I was just like, I would give anything to even know if it's okay or not in that operating room, to make sure that they come back. If one of them doesn't come back, what is going to happen? All this stuff, all the possibilities were racing through my head. It was really awful in like a very angry way, because all I wanted to do was rush out of there, find the room where they had her, and go in and see what the hell was going on. But I had to wait because I didn't know where they were, and they were going to get me once it was okay, once it was time for me to go in the room. And I couldn't, I didn't want to bust in there and mess it up, because then it's my own fault. But that was just an insane time. I have never felt like that in my entire life. No amount of anger or rage or sadness has ever risen to that level. And it was really unexpected. Sort of went into this whole day expecting it to be a lot of boring waiting around and Mandy being in pain and me bringing her, whatever I could and trying to help. This was not. When we got to the hospital, mind you, about 10 hours before that moment of me in that room, this was not an option that existed, because there was no reason to expect. Mandy was perfectly healthy. The baby was healthy. Everything was chill. There was no reason to expect that it would deteriorate into an emergency C-section at midnight, in the middle of the night, when, the staff isn't even necessarily full. They called in nurses from other areas to come help. It was crazy. And I'm sure other people have experienced worse than that in terms of, hospital situations, life and death situations. I hope that anyone listening and that you guys never have to be in that situation.
You said it was like 20 or 30 minutes of waiting, which doesn't sound like a lot, but that is. Like, when every second your heart's racing and you're panicked, that is such a long time. I remember during the Drowned Man saga when I found water dripping out of an air vent, and I went upstairs, saw water pouring out of the fan and the ceiling light, and my thought was Molly drowned in the tub. And it was about 5 seconds of feeling that, however long it takes to run up a staircase, 5-10 seconds of feeling that. And that felt like an eternity. I cannot imagine that on the minutes to 10 minutes to whatever, half an hour type scale. That is a long time to be feeling that.
Yeah, I sort of lost the point of what I was getting at, I guess. But for me, this is the most unforgettable, life-changing part. Well, maybe holding my son for the first time, but
who cares about that?
It was an experience that definitely changed the way I feel about, I don't know, life, being alive, staying alive. And I will say, in that moment, I also wish that we had done every little tiny thing that was available to us while Mandy was pregnant that could have changed that outcome even the slightest little bit. Because there's all this stuff. When a woman gets pregnant, there's all these rules. And, you can't eat sushi and can't have caffeine and all this sort of stuff. Those might be obvious, maybe not to some people, guys who don't know how this works, like I didn't at the start of it. But there's all this little stuff where it's like, you shouldn't lay in certain positions. You should take this, make sure you're taking your vitamins, take these things. There's all these hundreds of things you can do at any moment. And it got to a point where it wasn't just like I was like, that's stupid. It got to a point where Mandy was like, I don't have energy for this. Like, we want to be the best parents possible. And she did everything she could. Like, it's not like she was ignoring, obvious and helpful things. But it got to a point where how much will this help versus I'm exhausted because I'm pregnant. And I was just like, man, I wish we had done everything we possibly could. I didn't realize this could be this crazy. Because I always sort of imagined emergency C-sections were like, you're in a car accident or something crazy happens and it precipitates, something where the mother's in danger, the baby's in danger, and they're like, we got to get him out now. This baby needs to come out. But I didn't think it would just happen out of nowhere. And